Now, 37 days into the nationwide doctor strike, and despite nurses handling patients at public hospitals, a spot check of government hospitals in Nakuru County reveals the situation is still dire. Most patients want the government to accept the terms by doctors in order to prevent the near collapse of the vital healthcare system in the country. And of course, we'll be giving you details of that. We'll be discussing that also with our panelist here on AM Live in the market today. Remember, we'll be training our focus on the state of the economy. And still on that, we want also to doggedly follow what was happening yesterday with the opposition. And could the money spent to build the Mombasa-Nairobi standard gauge railway line have been used to build a superior railway line to the SGR? Economist David Ndii seems to think so, with the criticism of the SGR project, which is the single most expensive project ever undertaken by the Kenyan government. The overall cost of the project, for which Kenya has taken a massive loan from China, is 447 billion shillings.
Celebrations to mark the receipt of 6 locomotives and railway engines for the standard gauge railway at Mombasa's Port Reitz station, which is the starting point for the Mombasa-Nairobi line of the SGR. The government is keen to complete the 609-kilometer Mombasa-Nairobi SGR project this year.
Without having this railway, the port of Mombasa would not have been successful at all. That without an efficient standard gauge railway, the port of Mombasa will remain a non-investment.
Even with the project in the last phase, there is criticism on whether Kenyans will get their money's worth in the 447 billion shilling project.
Morocco, for the same amount of money, has built Africa's first bullet train, double line, electrified, 320 kilometers per hour. Ours, 120 kilometers per hour. Diesel train. We could have gotten the same service as we are going to get from this new railway by upgrading the existing one for a quarter of the money.
Ndii was speaking at the launch of the opposition's National Super Alliance at the Bomas of Kenya.
We have 2 railways where we are going to put oil on the road. Why? I'll tell you. Because oil, the road puts money in private people's pockets. If we travel by train, it will put money in the public pocket. So what we are doing now is we are killing the SGR railway even before we have commissioned it.
The government is, however, moving full steam ahead on the project, with at least 50 locomotives expected to be delivered by May.
The main event will be on 31st of May, 2017, a day before Madaraka Day.
Estimates have placed the cost of extending the SGR project from Nairobi to Malaba at 628 billion shillings. Alex Mwangi, NTV.
And remember, you're watching In the Market here on AM Live. Every Thursday we have Business Forum, and of course today we are looking at the state of economy. Allow me to introduce our panelists who are already here in the studio to take us through this particular session this morning. We have with us Mark Eldon. Mark Eldon is a management consultant. Also, he's a columnist with the Business Daily, and also is chairman of the council, of the board council of KCA University. Also, we have with us Gabriel Negatu, who is the regional director of African Development Bank, regional director, East African Resource Center. Also, we have with us Nderitu Muriithi, who is an economist. Also, we have Phyllis Wakiaga. She is the CEO of Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And also we have Aly-Khan Satchu, who is a financial analyst. Good morning, gentlemen and lady. Happy New Year. Fantastic. Right, we've been following also what has been happening, and of course this year started to be a very intense year. It's going to be a vicious campaign that we're going to see from the opposition and the ruling coalition as well. But Firmly on the agenda has been projects as well, one of which is now the standard gauge railway that we can see. We have the locomotives in the country as yet. So I don't know, from your own estimation, you've heard what David Ndii has said regarding the SGR, that this particular project, you know, it is the money that was actually stashed for SGR is exorbitant compared to Morocco. And why would we also sell the Rift Valley Railway, which also is a very contentious issue that we'll look into this morning, and have the standard gauge railway, while it could have been so cheap if maybe we could have upgraded the Rift Valley Railway, I should say. Let's begin with you, Mark.
Well, it is what it is. And it is controversial. I believe the World Bank doesn't fully disagree with David Ndii, who once was a consultant with them, that it might have been better just to build on the existing line, but it is there. And of course, it is the flagship project of the Jubilee Manifesto.
Yes.
And it has been pushed and made sure that funds are available. And meanwhile, we have to do with it all that we can. And I know that the private sector has been very keen to see that there is development along the line, that there is local content, that there is skills building, and all these benefits that are there, accepting the challenges of the debt repayment. As far as the exorbitant cost, I was reading something the other day that yes, it is much more expensive than Morocco or Ethiopia or elsewhere, but there are factors partly explaining that, like bigger stations and other infrastructure, the long bridges and tunnels that differentiate it from other projects.
So it could be the topography also of a land.
Well, and the way the whole project was designed as not just a bunch of railway lines.
All right, let's hear from Gabriel.
Hi, thanks, Dual. I also agree that it is rather meaningless to simply say Morocco this, Kenya this. There are so many differentiating factors. You know, I've seen part of this railway that passes through the Tsavo National Park now. That requires an elevated, facility that protects the wildlife and so on and so forth. And there are many factors that differentiate Kenya from Morocco. Therefore, to simply say kilometer per kilometer, Morocco is paying this and we are paying this, misses the point. I think it's important to first recognize that this is a regional public good. This is not only Kenya's railway. This is an East African railway. This is the gateway to all of East Africa. Second, the fact that it has started and is ending roughly on time. You know, I think they say end of May they're going to roll out the thing. It's been, what, 2 years, 3 years to build a 600-kilometer railway. This in itself is a major achievement, and it's one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the history of Kenya. And I think we need to step back, take out the politics and look at, if you're going to look at cost, consider what the implications of the topography, the infrastructure is, but also celebrate the fact that this was managed and will be completed on time, rather than these too simplistic comparisons between countries.
All right, talking of cost, we understand also that the government wants to get 44 billion shillings, because also they're realizing, I don't know if it is suddenly an epiphany, that this should be electrified. I mean, the standard gauge railway. So now they're seeking 44 billion shillings for the electrification of a standard gauge railway. Does it make any leak of sense that even when they were actually doing their cost benefit analysis, they did not really factor in that these railways, they have to be electrified, so to speak? Phyllis, 44 billion shillings, we have to borrow more. Does it make any leak of sense to you?
Thank you, Debarl. I think I just want to echo what the fellow panelists have said. It is what it is. We have built the railway. That is what we have now. The business community was really keen about having an effective and functioning railway, because the cost of transport and logistics is a big cost to business. And the Nairobi-Uganda railway line is really the backbone, not just for Kenya, but for the region. It gives us entry into Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC, and it was important to have the railway done. The issue of the cost, the railway must be competitive also, because for people to choose to use the railway over road transport, it means that it has to be competitive for them to do so. So ensuring that that happens when the railway is running will ensure that the railway is actually used and able to finance itself and pay back for the loan. Turning it into an electrical railway is important. How the project was structured, I think it should have been considered at the beginning of the project.
Yes.
But now that it's come up, we have to find a way to accommodate it if it's necessary. But it shouldn't be an additional cost, because if it is and the railway becomes uncompetitive, it will not be utilized.
Yeah, but they're saying we will borrow 44 billion shillings more to actually upgrade that to electrified railway. That's why we're asking, does it really make any leak of sense that you realizing at this moment in time that you need an electrified standard gauge railway?
I think it's clear that strategically we should have thought of all this at the beginning.
So poor planning is what we are actually reading into this.
Well, Debarl, look, this corridor, if you go back 100 years ago, this is not criticism. I mean, these people called it all kinds of names. Lunatic Express and what have you.
Yes.
I mean, yet the whole economy of East Africa unfolded because of this transport corridor. So I'm not surprised that the opposition is finding opportunity to criticize SGR. You go to the question of cost benefit. Look, Debarl, 40 billion shillings, you must put it in the context of what is the size of this economy. In fact, what is the size of the East African economy that this railway is going to service? And you will find that 40 billion shillings is not a lot in that context. So I think that, as to your question, why some kind of change in terms of the way the project is specified? I mean, projects do change all the time. I mean, look at, for example, the expansion of the airport. You know, new parameters come that, and to change is what is actually constant. I think doing it the other way, refusing to change simply because your original plan was in one way or another, that would be rigidity. So I think we should focus on what is the cost benefit of this railway. Now, the criticism, for example, that, there are suggestions of moving oil, I mean, that has to do with trying to get to the market faster, earlier. Because obviously, the actual plan for how oil from Turkana would be, is the pipeline to go to Lamu. So I think the opposition is taking facts and using them to selectively criticize, and I suppose that's their job. I mean, the purpose of opposition is to oppose government. So we shouldn't make too much of it. They are doing what they're supposed to do, which is to criticize government.
But the issue of the 44 billion did not really arise from the opposition.
No. It did not arise from the opposition. I'm saying those who are criticizing that change in terms of what the project is supposed to be also need to put it in a broader context of, what is the cost, what is the benefit of having an electric rail, how much faster can you move, how much more throughput can you get, and we need to evaluate it like that. If you look at our roads, for example, Debarl, we very often will start with a single lane, move to, most of our main roads start like that, because you at the inception of the project, you are looking at cost benefit. With the East African economies moving the way they have been, it makes sense to move more cargo at a faster rate through that same corridor, and therefore I think it is worth considering electrifying it. But again, as I said, I personally know for fact the purpose of opposition is to oppose, and they will.
All right.
And we shouldn't be too hot under the collar because they are opposing. That's what they're supposed to do.
All right, Ali, should we have done maybe a broader analysis on why the Rift Valley Railway is failing and right now is being sold, and why we should be upgrading to SGR? First of all, why did the Rift Valley Railway not really work? And if we are carrying the same elements also to the standard gauge railway, is it also bound to fail? Is it the issue of management?
So I think Rift Valley Railway was an existing asset, and there are questions around how that asset was managed. What was the asset base when it was bought? I'm not privy to the details of that transaction. But essentially, you are buying a mature business. I don't know what was within that mature business and what were the challenges with it. If I can just take a step back and say, look, if you think about Kenya, what is the key thing about Kenya? It is a geopolitical economic conduit for this region into the rest of the world. What do I mean by that? You're targeting 3 billion consumers potentially in the Indian Ocean, and you're targeting the rest of the world out of the port of Mombasa.
Yes.
This is the raison d'etre of the Lunatic Express. This is the raison d'etre of the SGR. We want to connect dots. It's not just about, we're sitting here talking about Mombasa-Nairobi. We want to connect tons of other places. This is the key point to be watching. Are we winning on that front? Are we going to extend it? Does this railway end up in the DRC? Right? That's what we should be thinking about. You're asking about what the planning is. The planning is surely to interconnect all these countries, ship everything out to sea via Mombasa, ship everything in via Mombasa, and ship it to and transfer it to all these other countries. So it's not just to be looked at in the context of Kenya Inc. It's to be looked at in the context of East Africa Inc. and a wider East Africa. To me, that is the key issue. Are we ahead of the curve? Are we in front of our competition? Is Magufuli challenging us with the oil pipeline, which is now funded and seems to be moving along at quite a big speed if you look at the recent transaction, where Tullow reduced their exposure in Uganda? I think these are the questions that we should be looking at. Cost-benefit analysis, look, you know, I'm as much a railway enthusiast as everybody else. I used to use this railway when I was a little boy to come to Nairobi to go to school. So I know it, and I think it's going to be a huge, there's going to be a massive spillover effect, particularly along the railway. I mean, one of the challenges for Kenya has been that most of our economic activity still exists on this railway line. If you think about it, if you look at Kenya, it's all along that actual corridor. So the question is it going to spill over? Is it going to get additional benefits? For now, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. I think it was a visionary project. I think we need to get behind it. And I really think that we're going to find some very interesting developments along there. The big issue for us really is job creation, manufacturing jobs. It's 900 jobs a day have got to be created given by how many people are coming on the workforce. Does this help us get there? I think it does, particularly to people who are willing to make those investments on that railway in order to ship their goods out of Mombasa and really go for that export market. You know, people always tell me, Aly-Khan, we got, you know, for example, the shilling's gone down, more exports are going out there. Forget it. We need to be in a position where we have export capacity and to take advantage of the situation. I'm hoping this is what this is going to do.
All right, and of course we are looking at the electrification of it. Right now we have a challenge also with the droughts, which is looming. We know our dams also, they're receding, and with hydroelectricity, which Kenyan electricity and the power grid is really pegged on that. We are looking at other countries like Morocco. Of course, also they have a very robust locomotive right now. And we're looking at India, where they have also the solar farm. Why is this country, if we go to the electricity way and we have a challenge right now to sustain this country with enough megawatts to supply electricity to every household, would this also be a challenge to this locomotive as well when we upgrade it when it gets electrified? Mike.
Well, of course it's a challenge, and generally there is this challenge in all countries of how you source the way in which you deliver electricity. I think we have begun to make some serious progress with wind and solar power in this country. I happen to be a director of Davis & Chetliff, which is best known for its borehole pumps. We've become very, very big in the solar business because of solar-powered borehole pumps. I was talking the other day to the chairman of the Turkana wind project. There are nearly 300 turbines that they've put up there. And he's looking at new investments, including one where you sell off a turbine like you pre-sell properties. And all over there are micro projects of solar-driven PCs and boreholes for villages, bringing in technologies from all over. It would be nice for it to be faster. On water heating for houses, the government legislated that there had to be solar water tanks for new houses. From this year, it's beginning to be for all houses. I'm not exactly sure how that will work. But there are a lot of little pinpoints of activity, some big, some small. It would be nice for it to reach a higher level, including to major projects. But people look at economics. Traditionally, the cost of solar and wind have been very high, the capital investment. These have been coming down very dramatically, particularly the solar. We've got out of the solar panel business because it's now just too much of a commodity. Good for the country, bad for us selling them. So we just buy them and have it as a value add onto a project. And I think it's this kind of economic thinking that must take place from the small farmer looking for to irrigate his fields through a borehole pump that's solar driven to an electric railway and huge wind farms and solar farms and that sort of thing.
All right, Gabriel.
Yeah. No, I think, Mike, on the, sorry, Debarl, on the question of whether this drought will have a significant impact on things, the choice to electrify this train, clearly, I'm not privy to the inside thinking, but was based on an analysis of what are the alternative energy sources. And clearly it would have been either this or diesel. And in the long run, I think Kenya is well positioned to generate enough power to justify electrifying this railway. Now, having said this, the effect of this drought is that, yes, the dams have gone down, so production of hydro power will go up. Cost will go up, or the power will come down. But Kenya has enough of a diversified energy base. As Mike said, you have solar, you have wind. The largest wind farm in sub-Saharan Africa is in Kenya. It's the Turkana wind power project, the largest in Africa. I have seen those turbines all over northern Turkana, in the big station they've built there. There are several geothermal projects. So I think there's enough energy source in Kenya to justify electrifying this and still make it cost efficient.
All right, do you agree with these sentiments? Because it seems we are prone in this country to actually rely heavily on hydro. Geothermal has not really picked one. Of course, we've seen so many projects being launched with the geothermal project, but it seems every time we remain none the wiser when it comes to the source of power, with heavily reliance on hydro. And we have right now drought. There's so much, everyone is getting scorched by the sunlight, but we don't really seem also aware that we can harvest this energy. We create enough farmlands. Good that we have turbines in Turkana. What about solar farmlands, maybe in Turkana, where also heat is intense?
Look, Debarl, the hydro is cheap. Hydro is clean and so on.
Cheaper than solar? Cheaper than solar?
Initially. But so if there is criticism really to be said, I think, for example, if you look at the pipeline of solar projects that Ministry of Energy and KPLC are signing power purchase agreements on, I think they could move a bit faster. Yeah? If I look at, say, the solar farms out in Laikipia that are planned and so on, so I think they could move a bit faster. But having said that, Debarl, I think, look at geothermal and the work that is going on in Menengai, and the work that is going on still further north in Sirale. So I think Kenya is moving, frankly, in the right direction in terms of getting power sorted out. Are we there yet? I don't think we're there. I mean, I think you still have to look at what is the cost per unit, say, to manufacturers. And I think that we still need to do more for us to be competitive overall. But I think you know, drought, every time we have drought, we will have this question of a reduction in our capacity to generate hydro. And I think that that is the reason to have a diversified, source of electricity. And therefore, yes, we should do more on solar. And I do think KPLC ought to move faster to help projects to get to closure by giving them power purchase agreements so that financing can happen. But having said that, we are generally in the right direction. And yes, every time we have drought, you will expect a reduction in the proportion that we can get from hydro. We should, of course, be always better prepared. I mean, I don't think drought should be catching us a bit off guard in terms of, you know, you hear now talk about rationing and things like that. I don't think it should be getting us off guard. I think we should have sufficient buffer. Yeah? And I know traditionally we've had that argument in both in financial circles and in government. How much buffer must we create in the supply side, and who finances it when it is sitting idle? But we are generally in the right direction.
Generally in the right direction. In the manufacturing sector, you know, also has been adversely affected by this because the cost of business is also heavily reliant on the cost of energy. And if now that one really goes up, we've seen a lot of farms also falling up in this country, and we are eagerly waiting to see if another shoe will drop this year in regards of farm, you know, closing up in this country because of cost of business. So will this is right up your alley when it comes to the manufacturing sector, because we know you've been also really advocating for a lower cost of energy so that also the manufacturers in this country could benefit. What are the dynamics?
As you mentioned, energy is definitely a key component in the cost of doing business in the manufacturing sector. For some manufacturing industries more than other, but it is really a cost of doing business. As a country, we are still higher than most of the countries we compete with, so it's important that we bring this down. In regards with what is happening, we are seeing a shift in terms of the energy mix that we have as a country. Now we have geothermal about 47%, hydro is at 39%, wind is coming in, we have the largest wind farm in Africa. So there's a lot of progression in trying to move from hydro and thermal, which is actually more expensive, and move into geothermal and wind.
Yes.
And in terms of solar, the Strathmore PV project is now on the grid. So solar is actually now starting to get into the grid. So we're going to see a lot more happening. As has been mentioned, there are a lot of projects that are happening. But for the sector, we really would want to see the cost of power come down, because it's something that really affects the competitiveness of the pricing of our goods. So hopefully these investments being made in geothermal, the investments being made in wind and solar, can eventually see us rely less on thermal, which is the highest in terms of pricing, and move us more towards renewable and green energy. As manufacturers, we also ourselves looking at our own energy efficiency, because you can also be wasteful and spend a lot of money on energy. So we are doing energy audits within the sector, identifying areas of wastage, and actually coming up with ways to be more energy efficient. And you're seeing manufacturers actually investing in renewable sources of energy, solar, biomass, and other sources of energy within their own farms. So there are numerous projects, as Mike said, within the country, and we'll see the cost of power coming down, but it's something that needs to happen, and happen very urgently if we're going to be competitive.
Right, so when we talk about you know, other sources of energy, we can also think about the solid waste, because I think the solid waste that really comes out of this country is so heavy with the Dandora dump site, and of course that debate of whether it should be moved to Ruai as well. Are we also, maybe as stakeholders, or should we also form a secretariat that can actually come up? Right, if you're truly looking, should we form another secretariat so that we can actually really mull over this, on how we can generate more, and from the solid waste as well? It seems also this is within the remit of the Nairobi County Council, but they fell dismally. Ali?
Well, I mean, interesting story about solid waste was I was reading somewhere that Sweden is shipping in solid waste now because they've got a shortage of waste. So maybe our Nairobi County can have a word with them. So you're quite right. But I just wanted to come back on your point about energy. 2 points that I wanted to make. First of all, if you compare us to Sub-Saharan Africa, energy has long lead times. We seem to have made a lot of progress. We have made a lot of progress. Wind, Takana, that was a big beast of a project. Not many people really thought it was viable, 400 kilometers up there. And so I think that was a good thing. The geothermal, which Phyllis is mentioning, huge strides have happened in geothermal. I think the challenge, the two things, one is we have more than enough power at peak hours. I know everyone complains, I can see on Twitter, but that's really a transmission issue. We've got poorer, we need to upgrade our transmission. So net, we're one of the few countries in Sub-Saharan Africa that have surplus power on the grid at peak hours, and I think that's a significant achievement. The challenge, reading what the Cabinet Secretary was saying, is managing this increase in supply and matching it with the increase in demand and timing that. Because if you mistime that, then you're basically going to be lumping users with extra costs because you're going to be financing too much, and that cost has to go somewhere. So I think you've also got to look at that more micromanagement of supply and demand and make sure that you're timing it appropriately. If we turn up in 2 years' time with 5,000 megawatts, demand is 2,500, those people paying for that 2,500 are going to be paying twice the price. So I think, although it looks negative, it's actually a positive challenge we've got, but we've got to deal with it slightly differently.
Right, but look at it also. Because we tend to swing on the extreme sides of the pendulum. Today we're talking about drought. Come November or October, we'll be talking about floods, right? And we remain none the wiser in between, right? So we don't harvest from the drought with the solar energy, and we don't harvest from the water, the floods. You'll see so many people, there's no harvesting of this. That's why I am saying we really need to form a secretariat on how we can actually,
do you want to be the secretary? Are you going to wear a skirt?
Gabriel is volunteering.
I'm wondering if the Secretariat will also deal with the issue of the Lamu coal-fired plant with importing coal from South Africa. It's another controversial one, isn't it?
Temporarily.
Temporary.
It's a short-term importation of coal until the Kenyan coal in Kilifi,
in
Kitui is ready, but it will be imported from South Africa. But eventually, it will be all Kenyan coal. So,
but it's still controversial, isn't it? The environmental aspect. Do we need all that power?
Impact assessment
do we need it from coal anywhere?
Well, the thing of it,
should we be importing coal at this moment in time when also we're talking about carbon emissions and
I think that's the important point. If you looked at that, if you looked at weather risk, right? If you, I don't know what the term is, I've forgotten, but Africa is being inordinately affected by global warming. I think out of 20 of the countries which are most hit, 18 are in Africa. So we've got a problem. You're talking about this droughts and rains. This is going to get worse. It's not going to get better, right? We got really lucky with El Nino 2 years ago. I mean, we were the one country in Africa that got more rain. And I think just from an economic point of view, just to touch on this, which is what you were touching on, this weather shock risk has a huge impact on our economies. And we've also got to consider how we're going to manage that. For example, we get a drought, we get a surge in food prices, what happens to monetary policy? These things hit us very, very quickly. So I think, the points you're making are important also in a wider macro point. How are we dealing with global warming? How are we going to now deal for what this new normal of drought, sun, and then rains? And it seems to be happening all over the world, not just in Africa. So I think you're right. Your secretariat has also got to look at the long-term issues as well.
Right, and I think I'm going to appoint to be one of the directors because you raise a very important point. You see, we have the big issue with waste. And you've raised a very important point about Sweden. They're having, issues. They're importing waste. These negotiations should be also with the Governor Kidero, because they have a problem on how they can dispose this waste with the landfills that are now, it has been a debate.
And I was driving around Nairobi actually during the quiet period, because it's so pleasant over Christmas, you can get anywhere in 2 minutes. Yeah. We have a problem with waste, and visually it's not looking that great. I mean, I went round, you know, the perimeter on the bypass roads, and so we've really got to deal with that. And I think, you know, I would like to see a big effort on that. Beautify the country as well. I mean, you know, I'm from Mombasa. You land there and you're looking at, this is the first sight you see as a tourist. I mean, forget everything else. That, I think we've got to look at our environment, take more pride in it, and of course, you're right, Governor Kidero should find a solution. This is not rocket science. If the Swedes are importing it, goodness, why aren't we doing something?
But the technology is there, no? The technology is there. The private sector is ready to come in and convert waste to energy. So if you can just sort out the governance/procurement issues, Nairobi could be producing, Mombasa could be producing power from waste. It's just now everybody wants a piece of that action.
Right. So we export our waste. That will be the prime solution.
There's something we need to sign on to be able to export waste. So we also need to do that. Tanzania, for example, has signed on to it and they can export their waste. We haven't.
Oh, really?
Yes,
really?
I had a discussion yesterday about
what do
that.
we have to sign to?
I will get the details, but
Just
there is
to
something.
avoid dumping.
Yeah, there is something you have to sign.
Otherwise,
Yes.
Dumping waste.
You see,
Yes, there's
nuclear
something you
waste.
must sign.
Remember a few years ago,
They were
Italy
dumping
wanted
it.
to send nuclear waste to Somalia.
Yeah.
That's still waste, but glowing
There's an
waste.
international framework
There's some now international
for waste
standards on how
exchange.
to-
And
Oh, but we are far cry from nuclear waste.
Yeah.
I don't know even the Kenyan nuclear agency is doing so far.